All right. This is going to be a good one. So excited to welcome to the Whole Child Virtual Summit, my friend, Mr. Don Bartel, Eastlake High School, Washington State. How you doing, man?
I'm good, brother. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, this is going to be good. And the reason why I say that is I always love this story. I met you at a training that I was leading, and I was greeting people down at the door, and it was like upstairs, and my wife was actually helping to set up the training, and she sends me a message and says, there is someone here that by the end of the day, you're going to want to work with and connect with on a consistent basis. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I'm just telling you right now. And knowing me so well, she was exactly right. And I sent her a message, I think at like the first break. And I was like, it's this guy, Don Bartel from Eastlake, right? And she's like, yep. And I don't know if at the time you had a beard. My guess is she's probably like the guy, or I probably said the guy with the beard.
Nope, not yet.
That's awesome. Well, this is going to be good for many reasons, but one of the things I love is that you do many, many things really well, and you do them passionately. But to give context for people, what are some of the different hats, roles that you play at Eastlake High School?
It's funny. I just had a conversation with our dean of students yesterday about the difference between job and roles, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like my jobs are, I am leadership teacher, ASB advisor, activities coordinator, head football coach, and general kind of all around support and facilitator of things at Eastlake. So yeah, it's a fun deal for me for sure. And it keeps me busy.
Oh yeah. Cause having been a student activities advisor, that by itself is a full-time job.
Yeah.
With the teaching load, the fact that you do that and head football coach and other things, you have to be a little bit crazy, which is going to be great for this. And so I think to get you going, and so that people have even more context, not only you're a passionate individual, you've got a great mind for moving forward the climate and culture of an organization, including your school. I know we're going to talk a little bit more like kind of ground level of like things that are even really strong thoughts to think about as a leader, whether you're a building leader, whether you're a coach, a teacher, a parent, could be anything. I know we're probably going to be there a lot, but even the idea of the school-wide branding that you have done around, and we did a podcast on this, I remember, but it's like one thing at the elementary level to say, you know, here's our value. We're safe, respectful, responsible.
Yeah.
You can't really do that at the high school level. And so I just love, even if it's a little bit like at the high school level, it has to be more engaging, more relevant, something you can get behind. Maybe just speak a little bit to WSPS.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to start here first theoretically. And I would say this, it's like I learned in college when it was my turn to go grocery shopping for myself, that all-time rule that everybody learns at some point, never grocery shop hungry, right? You go there with a list. My wife is incredible. She has meal plans. Like she goes, knocks it out and gets home. And I'm thinking that theory is the same with when we talk about culture and climate in schools or in programs or organizations. When you're hungry for it, everything looks good. Our thought here at Eastlake has always been, we need to find external resources that connect to a consistent internal message. So that's our start. Now we know what we're looking for because we know who we are. But it has to start with some sort of cultural inventory. It has to start with some sort of, like in football, we would call self-scout. Like, what is it that we actually do? Because the reality is your culture, your philosophy, all those things aren't what you say it is. It's what people see it is. And so we wanted to be really, really honest and say, what is it that is unique? Not necessarily like so unique as, 0.1% of all the schools in the world are like this. Not that unique, but what is unique about Eastlake? What is our true identity? And then let's build from the inside out instead of the outside in, which coincidentally is why Character Strong is such a great partner for the things that we do and why you and I clicked right away. So I walked in the room and thought, external resource to our consistent internal message. So we looked at who we are. And I had the advantage that I had been at Eastlake for 3 years, from 2005 to 2008 before I left, and then came back again 5 years later. I knew what I thought Eastlake's strengths and uniqueness were. And when I came back, that's what we focused on. This idea that we have kids who are pushed to remain individuals, but share in the vision of making it a great place.
Yep.
And our mascot is the Wolves, so it worked perfectly for us to play off Rudyard Kipling's poem, the strength of the wolf is the pack, the strength of the pack is the wolf. And so we said, perfect, that's what we want. We want to promote this. You go do you with us. Like, do your thing and you will make us better just by you being great. And if you want to connect in other ways, we're also going to provide those opportunities as well for you. And so we just pound this WSPS thing, and the kids have taken it over and they say Wispus all the time. And I used to cringe. And now I love it because I'm like, they've taken it. It's their thing. But it's like that idea that as long as I'm bettering myself, I'm bettering the group. I have purpose. I have value. I have meaning. That it's impossible for me to do something and not impact other people. So we just push that. Keep going. Do you. Just remember that we need you at some point to engage, and you have value when you do that. It's been probably the single greatest thing that we've done.
Wow.
It also has been difficult getting people to understand what the heck that is.
Yeah, Wolf Strong.
The first couple of years, the security guards coming to me like, I saw 2 kids drive over curbs in the parking lot. That wasn't very WSPS of them. I'm like, hold on a second. We're not going to co-opt this for discipline, right? This is like the thread that binds us. It's who we are. Yeah. And ironically, the kids here are living it. Where you see more references to Wispus and WSPS or Wolfstrong is really the kids who've gone. Because now they're at college and they're seeing cultures of the campuses they're on, and they're talking to kids at school about what their high school experience was like. And they're realizing, wow, we had a unifier. Yep. We had something that was all of us, and we belong there. If you're here, you belong here type of thing. And I think that's what's been really cool about it.
So good. So let's keep going. Here's what I'd love for you to do. I know that you get asked to speak on these topics. I know that anybody that comes to your session is going to leave at least having had passion at them. Sometimes like a fire hose, because we only get so much time. Yeah. That's a good thing. I like that. I prefer that. And I know that you do an excellent job of moving forward a team, an organization, a group. And so I'll say that for you. I just want you to speak your truth when it comes to what are things that have worked for you when it comes to moving your team forward with that culture climate work that any building leader, any district leader, any teacher, right, of students, anybody who's working with people could put through their filter and or consider and think about how am I doing? What are some things that I could pull from when it comes to this work that many times is really, really hard, deep level work, not surface level work.
Yeah. Well, here, I'll just start with this, kind of have this thing queued up. One of the things that's impacted me is being able to speak at different conferences and getting to meet people. I think sometimes the best part about speaking at a conference is you get in free and get to listen to everybody else.
Yep.
And so I ended up being kind of an interloper in a conference for a private company a couple years ago where a guy was speaking named Alan Trimble. And Coach Trimble had just found out that he had ALS. And it was impactful to me because I'd met him before. He was already influencing me as a coach. He's one of the most successful, if not the most successful high school coach in Division I 6A football in Oklahoma. But this presentation was going to be different because it was about his life now and his realizations. It was called Full Crisis Living. And he started the presentation in a way that I thought was super impactful and really good that only he could do. And he asked he made the statement, I know what you're all looking at me thinking right now, what you all want to know. And it's the same question my wife and my daughters wanted to know as well. It's, what's it like to know that I'm dying? And he said, and I would respond to you in the same way I responded to them. What's it like for you to pretend that you're not?
Wow. And
silence in the room. And then you could hear the pens click open. And then we all just started to get to work. And the one, he left a lot of great lessons in that. But the one that I think is important to start with for us is that idea about how we compartmentalize our lives. And a big one for football guys is, faith, family, football, in that order. And the reality is that's not really how it works out. And he was admitting that early on in his life, he had compartmentalized everything. So at certain points, football took a lot of his life. And so in doing that, he would take time from friends and family and his faith and his personal health or fitness to do so. And then obviously over time, football took so much time that he would have to maybe address a little bit more issues with family. And so now football starts to suffer and he's still not connecting with his friends. And then at a certain point, he's realizing, I just got a diagnosis. I'm sick. Where am I at health-wise? And what's my fitness level? And how am I going to fight this thing if I'm not healthy? And what kind of came out of it was this idea of a true north, that the things that we do aren't they're really more just a part of one great mission that we're on. And we need to stay on that mission. Like, if we look at this in terms of our lives, our friends, our family, our personal fitness, our faith, our jobs, all of that professional side, that all is a huge part of it. But at the end of the day, like, we do all of those things and align all of those things again with that one consistent internal message. Now, it's going to be different for you than it is for me. And we do a values exercise in my leadership classes. We did it as a football staff. And we throw values up on the board and say, we've got 32 kids in class. We'll probably have 28 values off that list of, say, like Brene Brown's book, where she gives you 160 values. We might narrow that down. Each kid finally narrows it down to one, and we might have 28 different values. Well, no kid is going to look up on the board and say, nope, I don't value that. There's no value in that. We all do. We just place priority over things, and that's perfect. That becomes our consistent internal message. Our job then is just to stay on that mission. This is what we're going to do. Now, as a coaching staff, we put things together and looked at like a culture self-scout of our program. And we really believe as a program and as a school that your culture is really what you actually really do believe and how you actually really do behave. And then your climate, as you guys talk about too, it's like, it's that feeling then that it creates, the experience that it gives people, right? And so looking at it, we legitimately had to look at behaviors. And this is the part of, as difficult as it is being a head football coach and activities coordinator, leadership teacher, it's one of the benefits of it. Looking at things with a lens of, there is a timeline. There is a scoreboard. There is a proving ground every Friday night, and then we go back to work every weekend, and then we practice all week, and we prove again and reassess where we are on Friday night every single week, as long as they let us, right? And so doing so, we're really able to focus on some key behaviors. Now, everything that we do is duplicitous in everything else that I do. There's nothing that I read, nothing that we go through in leadership or in football that isn't volleyed back and forth between the two. It's all applicable. And again, it's all staying on mission, right?
Yep. So
when we did the value exercise as coaches, one of the things that we looked at was, what are all of our words saying? I might be saying love, where, one of our assistant coaches, who's like the rock, like in our program, his big thing was reliability. I go, okay, well, I'm love because that's what I teach about. We're all about the agape. But at the end of the day, he's saying, well, reliability is most important to me. Another guy says joy. And we're looking at this as a staff. We're like, you know what? At the end of the day, this is really about, it's just about relationships. Our one true north is relationships. We do everything we do because of what the relationships provide us. Yep. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, that's the simplest thing in the world. Because if you look then at like, why I choose the job I choose, why we do the work we do, why you and I are friends. Like, you make me better. Our relationship is a huge catalyst and an igniter for me in my life and my professional work. It also forces me to be a better dad and a better husband and be more attentive to my friends. And I take care of myself because I love those people. And I mean, it just goes round and round and round. And so as a staff, we look at it and we're consistently saying that what we want to do is build relationships. And for us, I'll see if I can put this up on the screen for you too and say, this is where we are as a staff in football. We consistently say, this is our credo for us. Now, we have values that we work off of, but for us, we say Eastlake football builds relationships for us, okay? that, and I'll see if I can get it on the screen. There we go. Okay, Eastlake football builds relationships for us that allow us to experience all those things that we value: growth, accountability, joy. But it's the determiner of competition. It's the funnel or the screen or the challenge of adversity. It's competition, having somebody trying to actively stop you. It's not uncommon for us to say pregame to the kids, this is a battle of cultures. It really is. We play games all the time. We look across the field and they do things completely opposite from the way that we do things. And it's also a battle inside of our culture to maintain our own standards, hold each other accountable, focus on how enjoyable the game actually can be based on the relationships it builds. So it's cool as we get done with this, all this work, we show it to the kids and like, yep, that's why we play football. It's why you coach it. It's why we play it. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And so there's nothing about that. You could take Eastlake football out and put Eastlake leadership. Allows us to build relationships, experience growth, through activities.
Yep.
You could supplant anything you want in there. And that for us, that's our mission. That's our true north. Now I know what it is. Let's go find people that can help us do that. Whether it's John Norland or Scott Bakovich or Davey Muse or Pete Carroll, Russell Wilson, we can find those things. We'll find those things, which is great.
So good. So good. So when you think about starting with that true north, and that Coach Trimble thing is such a powerful, I love that opening that then leads to that. Let's take it a couple different areas, because I know, and I've had a lot of notes from our meetings, and I want to think the best way to transition this, but I love, and take me to the concept of when it comes to the work as a leader, and then even what you're sharing with your athletes, but as a coaching staff in particular, because I think it so relates to teaching, right, to leading, if I'm a building principal, but the difference between helping, saving, and serving. Okay. Because that clarity, I think, is critical.
Well, and we work off this idea of, and we'll probably get to it today too, but we work off this premise of consistently being in that feedback loop with failures, so we know what our failures are teaching us. And this is a hard one for me because it's so personal.
Yeah.
But there is a distinct difference between helping, saving, and serving. Helping is what I would equate to what you guys talk about in the difference between being nice and being kind. Helping takes little effort most of the time. It's sometimes very reactionary, doesn't necessarily have to be proactive, but you're helpful. It doesn't necessarily address a legitimate need. I don't need you to help me pick my stuff up when I drop it, but it's nice that you did it, and it's helpful, and we appreciate it. Where I think it goes south when we're talking about athletics or in organizations is when we celebrate the guy who picks up everybody's helmet at the end of practice and carries it into the locker room. Because the reality is that guy's being helpful, but he's not addressing a legitimate need for anybody other than the guy who got hurt and carted off and can't grab his own helmet. That's the guy you're serving. That's the guy you're addressing the legitimate need. Otherwise, we're being fooled as coaches and advisors and leaders and mentors. We're being fooled by niceties and people who are helping out who really aren't adding substance to it. Maybe what we're trying to teach is people to actually be responsible for their own stuff. And picking that stuff up for people is helpful, but it's not serving their legitimate needs. Now, moving on to the next piece, like saving is the one that's really dangerous and super personal. I think I got into teaching because, one, the impact that my teachers had on me. When my dad died when I was in high school, it was such a profound experience, and I wasn't a great student, and I wasn't a high character person. I was a user of people and a manipulator, and it was easy for me to feel like everybody's going to give up on me, and then they didn't. And then all of a sudden, people came around me and helped me. What I didn't realize at the time was they weren't saving me. They were serving my legitimate needs and continuing to push me and empower me. But I watched too many movies before I got my ed degree. And those first 5 years of teaching, all I thought we did was save kids. And there are plenty of people that will tell you, we're just saving lives. You just might have saved that kid's life today. And as I got older, I started to be super uncomfortable with it. And I think it was because I finally realized after that first 4 or 5 years that in order to save someone, you need them to be a victim. And I'm not comfortable with that relationship.
Mm.
Not only do I need a victim, I also need a villain. So it could be a circumstance or a person, but I need something to be hurting someone so I can swoop in and be the hero and save that person. Now, what we're really saying when we're saving, though, is I'm going to do it for you. I want you, and what's weird is we'll manipulate the situation. So I will break you down until you are crying, sobbing uncontrollably, talking about how awful this is and what a horrible situation is and how unfair it is and all of that. But I'm not going to teach you how to fish in response. I'm going to feed you fish over and over and over again. So now you become reliant on me. And I act like I'm the hero, but I am in a weird way actually reliant on the villain to continue to suppress, oppress, abuse, take you for granted, whatever it may be. And I'm just not comfortable with that relationship because at the end of the day, we're not serving anyone's legitimate needs if all we're doing is making them dependent upon us so we can build our ego or feed our ego about what great work we're doing in the world.
Yep. Even if we don't realize that is
exactly. Yep. Exactly. And I think a lot of people get into coaching thinking, I'm going to give all my knowledge to you and I'm going to save you. And the reality is what we're learning more and more as coaches is we're less and less of the equation with what we say than we are with what we allow them to do. So if we're going to serve, we are going to address legitimate needs. We are going to be intentional about targeting those needs, and we are going to do whatever it takes. And that means I am going to sacrifice everything from my ego and my desire to see results.
Yep. Because
kids don't work on our timeline.
Yep.
So I have to be ready to serve the work and send them out off into the world. And maybe I get a text message 8 years from now, maybe. But we sacrifice that. And sometimes we sacrifice relationships. And the first time that Hunter got me was when he started talking about, having the ability to have a hard and heavy hand in things. Like sometimes people need the wake-up call. Sometimes we need boots to asses. Sometimes we need the sharp tongue. Sometimes we need the curt response. Sometimes we need the truth. And it's sacrificing relationships for the depth of a relationship down the road or to provide for somebody's legitimate needs. And you never know what that impact's going to be. But if we know what the work is, we can serve the work, serve the person. And at the end of the day, helping can be serving, or serving can be helping, but not the other way around, I guess. Like, I don't have to have legitimate needs. So serving is helping, but helping is not necessarily serving.
Yeah. And even to speak to it, if people are wondering, when you said Hunter, speaking of James Hunter or Jim Hunter, who's also on this virtual summit, who's written some books on servant leadership. And so I encourage people to even listen in on that because he digs deeper into it. But I agree. I've always loved on that servant leadership side, the understanding of kind of pre-correcting or correcting the incorrect view on servant leadership, that it's just about it's just about kindness. It's just about being a doormat and letting everybody else have that. No, it's like when you really understand servant leadership, it's the tough and the tender that go hand in hand, because it requires honesty. It requires commitment to those things. And sometimes that means boundaries. Sometimes it means having the tough conversation, whatever that might be.
Well, especially when you go back to what's most difficult in our lives. And this is a Brent Grothe piece, right? Grothe told me a long time ago that one of the most difficult things, if not the most difficult thing we deal with in life, is conflict with a peer. So when we talk about serving legitimate needs, I'm also talking about serving the legitimate needs of our coaching staff.
Yep.
Like, I'm responsible for that whole thing. So to pull a guy aside and say, you got to figure this out. Like, we don't do this here. This is not what it looks like. This is what you should be doing. I'm going to supply supports for you here, but you've got to get this work done. That's tough. That's really tough. And it's funny because today I just had the conversation, it's spring cuts, tryouts, all that. I've got senior captain who's on a different team, spring sports team, who's coming to me today and says, one of my best friends is unhappy with the way tryouts went and some kids that didn't make the varsity team. But he's now taking it out by bad mouthing coaching staff, the team, the program, all of this. And I said, okay, perfect. So let's address this the way it probably needs to be addressed, which is it's two separate issues. One is a process-based issue where you can have conversations around why things got done a certain way, very objectively. The other one is a character-based decision. Now, that's the real conflict you have to deal with. I can see where you're saying to your friend who's your exact age, who you're 18, he's 18, like I get where you're coming from, but we don't respond that way because there's no productivity to that.
Yeah.
That doesn't help.
Yep.
And so it doesn't serve anybody any good. And so even the kids are seeing it as they monitor those things that, boy, that idea of legitimate needs almost gives you the power at times to stand alone and say, I'm going to be alone for a little while, but I'm serving the work.
Yeah.
And eventually it will come around.
So good. And yet a lot of times what prevents us from entering into the more difficult spaces or really pushing hard as a leader is, for many, that fear of failure. And you referenced it. So let's talk just at least briefly about that. Talk to me about the concept you were sharing of like, what are we learning from our failures? How do you bring that in? I think, did you say the failure loop?
Yeah. So we talk about, so I would talk about it this way. We start with the idea of, with Hunter stuff, intention and action is will. Intention minus action is nothing. You get nothing from that. I got hooked onto this idea of, in life, it's like I have a preference on how I want to see things. And over time, I can continue to build to be good at that. I can build the skills. That skill acquisition model is constantly flowing for me. Yep. I am conscious and I am skilled and I'm working to become unconscious at it. But with a timeline like with sports, one of the big things I think is so important is to understand that we really need conviction here. Like, my intention is great, but when I'm convicted about what I want to get done, it's much more immediate and I'm pushing through obstacles much more readily, with much greater steam, with much more, with greater priority and urgency, right? And I heard this quote a long time ago that said, opinions can be argued, but conviction is best shot. And I think Lawrence of Arabia said it. And I love that because it really is. Conviction is our intention, that strongly held belief. But where does it come from? Well, it comes from failure. And if we look at, even if we're just looking at the work that's been done around brain science and how we repeat skills that open pathways that wrap themselves in myelin, and the more myelin it is, the smoother it is, the more unconscious it becomes. They say that you have to apply a degree of difficulty and failure to the process. We have to create a breeding ground for failure so that we can allow for the feedback, so we can allow for the conviction, so we can allow for the movement to actually continue to get better and better and better. So then we started to look at it and say, we want to take failure back. We want to provide a definition of it, and we want to create part of the process. I recently listened to a podcast where a longtime NCAA Division I championship fast pitch coach from UCLA talked about it as failure recovery, I think was the term she used. And it's part of what they do. They understand that failure is so important that they talk about failure recovery and what that process is. So what's failure to us? Simple. It's an unpleasant realization about an endeavor. I really don't care if there are other definitions in our world. I just know that it's really only failure when we realize it. And it also puts it on a scale or a spectrum for us. That if things don't go well today and I screw up the tech here, or there's awkward silence because you're waiting on me, like, that's a failure, right? No one's dying, like no one's life's at risk, but it's a failure and we'll have to figure out how to do it. So we say, as soon as I realize that, now I get to decide things, but it's on that spectrum. And I use the example when I traveled to Nashville to speak, I said, on my trip, maybe I forgot to pack my socks. That's a failure. But I can go to the gift store in the hotel. I'm going to pay 10 times what I would pay at Target for the socks, but that's the consequence, right? It's very little. That's on one end. On the other end, though, is if I get on the plane and I forget to pack my parachute, right? We're jumping from 10,000, 15,000 feet, whatever it is, and I don't have a parachute. Like, that's the total opposite end of the spectrum. So when we're all done, the lesson I learned from is on that side of the scale. The lesson you learn from hearing stories about me, because I'm not around to learn anymore, are on the other side of the scale. And so if that's how wide the scale, if it's infinitely that wide and there are a million things that fall in between, let's take failure back and say, let's use it again.
Yep.
Like that's a failure and that's not even registering on the scale. So let's talk about it. Perfect. Well, if it breeds conviction, if it breeds strongly held beliefs, how does it do that? Simple. We say we all have the exact same reaction to failure. Some way, shape, or form, we say, never again am I experiencing that. Now, where we differ in endeavors is what our response is next. Because at some point, we're just going to say, it's not worth it to me. I'm not convicted enough about that. I don't have a talent for that. That doesn't fulfill me. It's not something I really have a knack for, or it's unpleasant. I would use myself as an example. I grew up thinking I would love to be a lounge singer at some point. Tons of character, you're handling the mic, you're singing these songs, you're pointing at people in the audience. Hey, like it's this really cool thing, but I can't sing. Yep. And so I experienced failure early on when it came to singing and realized never again am I experiencing that failure. I'm done. I give up. I quit, right? So I say that because I don't want to cast all of the decisions we make to give up on things as negative, because we give up on those things. We're saying no to those things. That means we can say yes to other things that might benefit us more or benefit other people or both, right? Then the other response we have is we're going to get better. I'm going to get better at this. I'm going to figure this out. This is important to me. So I am now going to do this, right? And that's that idea of where I'm building my will. The piece here that's so important is intention is everything. Yes. There's also a part of this that is, we can say intentions plus action, but I find myself especially in athletics or on a timeline of events where we have to put something on or it has to be done at a certain time, that what we're really saying is we need conviction. That's the best intention is conviction, and the best action is volition. What is it that you're willing to do to get what it is that you want? And that's the will. That's the choosing of those actions, because that's so dang important to us, where there's no other alternative. We're going to get better and we are going to accomplish this mission. And at the end of the day, that's what we're going to hang our hat on, because that's who we are. That's what we do. That part's super important for us.
So good. And once again, even too, I love what you've done. And he's been such a great support of us, but in James Hunter's Servant Leadership Triangle and the pieces that you've been able to add to it, to make work for the work you're doing as a coach and as a teacher. And Jim has been a great supporter, including being on this summit, which is awesome. Maybe this has been an awesome talk, and I always can't get enough from you, but maybe the last topic today, because a lot of this has been around like thinking through that leadership lens and how I'm leading, whoever it is that I'm leading, and how that applies. And I think about the failure piece even as something that we need to bring more to the forefront across the board in education. And one of the things that comes to mind is the idea that we have so many fragile thoroughbreds, some of our highest achieving students, as Andrew Sokach says, who at the first sign of failure or adversity, like crumble. And so what could we be doing as a system to bring something in like this as failure as a powerful learning tool, as something that is actually good? Like, yes, let's utilize it in this way as a staff, as a teacher with the work that I'm doing and what it is that I'm teaching. I think there's some big implications there and things to think through. Let's end, with this. Let's end with this idea of, within even James Hunter's model, he talks about different styles of leadership. I love what you've done with this. He talks about, on two opposites, you got, power, leading through power, leading through influence. Take me through a little bit of your thoughts on that with like the different ways that you could view or break that down.
Perfect. So just for concept, like this is the end of the triangle, the top. We've earned that title of leader with people. And now what do those roles of the leader look like? Well, we're going to struggle with that power versus influence. And we know through studies, behavioral studies, that once we get that power, sometimes it can be so toxic for us. And so we want to hit this right away with our guys, with our coaches, with our staff, and say, at the end of the day, we want to be leaders by influence. We want to get permission from people to speak into their lives, to actively participate in their lives. Once we do that, we understand there are like 3 different ways that this happens. Now, a power leader can't do all of these things. Power leaders really only do a couple of them. But the 3 roles we play are to coach, command, and mentor. We'll talk about commanding. Think of it as like as a triangle as well. I don't want to overuse that, but think about it as a triangle as well. If you divided it into thirds and it's representative of time, these each take a certain amount of time. Commanding takes the least amount of time. It takes the least amount of relationship and can be influenced completely through power, only that. I have a title of power. I am a teacher. I have a power title. I am ASB advisor. I have a power title. I'm a head football coach, right? So I can command. Now, this has its place. I think with each one of these, you're still addressing legitimate needs. Like, if I look behind you right now and I see flames, I'm not going to describe the flames in detail to you. I'm going to say, John, get up and get out of there. And hopefully our relationship is you're going to get up, get out, and then look back and like, why did I just do that, right? But it takes little to no time and it takes little to no relationship. And a power leader can grab onto that and command, command, command. And it's also why as power leaders, we take credit for incredible athletes, incredible creative genius in our population because, well, I told them to do that. Well, guess what? If you were in the room, they would have done it anyway, right? In fact, they're probably doing it in spite of you, not because of you. Okay? So the commanding takes very little time, so we'll spend less time on that. The next piece is coaching. And I want to tie coaching specifically to building skill. Because in the classroom, we're trying to get kids to build certain skills.
Yep.
On the field, we're doing the same thing. But the reason the skill is important, it takes more time than coaching does, but it still has an expiration date. You're trying to get them to acquire a skill. You're trying to get them to a certain point. And then once the skill has been acquired, now it's a question of, do they need me anymore? Am I relevant or do they need something else? But the coaching part is where the power leader steps away or fades away and the leader of influence stays, because in order to build skill, now you have to do that to experiential piece, which is, I can tell you that there's some things you need to do because there's some things you can learn from doing it, but I can't make you to go through the thing, even though if you don't, you're not going to learn the thing the way that you could, right? That whole experiential teacher's paradox.
Yep.
But to coach, there's that part of providing the experiential. And I think that hits in the beginning of what you're talking about. How can we implement this? Well, I can tell you, we're very intentional at practice about making our kids fail. Very intentional. We put them in horrible situations. And then when they succeed outright, we make some flagrant disregard for the rules and say the way that they did it isn't fair. We change the rules and tell them they lost. And then we punish them with up downs or push-ups or putting away the gear. But it's them trusting us through that. And then once they trust us through that, then you spend most of your time, because this could be the rest of our lives, guiding people, really being mentors. And you really want to talk about influence. You really want to talk about what our definition of when you get permission from people to speak into their lives, that's mentoring. Yeah. Because now we're guiding on a path. And here's the greatest part. I heard somebody say a long time ago, and I love it because it fit into something that I learned right away in teaching. Anyone can learn anything from anybody else at any given time. There are experts. We were reading a story when my first year of teaching, an honor sophomore lit, about Federico's falcon, and some girl in class raises falcons. She's an expert on falconry, right? And all of a sudden, she's leading the class at 15 in this lesson about falconry and about how this story is accurate here, but not there and whatever. And I'm sitting back thinking, this is incredible. People know incredible things.
Yeah.
But then somebody hit on the idea that anyone can mentor anybody at any given time either. And I think how many times kids have mentored me by talking about what's going on in their lives and taught me not to jump to conclusions, to hear people out, to be genuine, to not try to fix things. Sometimes we just need to talk. They've mentored me in great ways, but we have to give people permission for that, or we'll never hear it. And so there's a ton of time that gets spent on that. It's a commitment to serving the work. And sometimes that mentoring part is, I'm going to create an experience for you, and then I'm not going to jump in with you every single day, because my job is not saving you. It's serving you. And that's really, really difficult. So when we look at those roles of a leader, I think it's so incredibly important for us to say, you know, my only frustration at times with what I do is that the class is called leadership. I want to change it in some way, because at the end of the year, I'll ask the seniors again, what do you want to learn before you leave here? Well, I want to learn how to have positive relationships and be a good person in those relationships for other people, because I'm going to college and it's going to be tough. And I'm like, you already know, it's all right here. We just put the title of leadership on it. It's not leadership at all, in the sense that, you know, if leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less, and then leadership and practice is relationships, then it's just the relationship triangle.
Yeah.
You want to have intimate, positive, transformational relationships with people, then have great intention, have volition, be convicted about it, choose to love people unconditionally, figure out and learn how to assess for their legitimate needs, and then provide for those things in order and in kind, and build influence. And then you earn the title of friend or mentor or coach. You know, like, I just think it's an oversimplification of a very long and serious and purposeful process. But let's not kid ourselves. Like, it really is that simple.
Yeah. Simple and yet not easy. And I think that's what makes it so great, right?
And worth it, right? Didn't tell you it was going to be easy. We told you it was going to be worth it.
That's right. I like that, actually. I like that frame a lot. And I think that the worth it piece maybe is a great way to end it. I mean, we were talking and getting ready for this, and to go to how hungry students are for this type of work, even the teaching of these different principles. And I think it even goes to, I mean, we intentionally, even at Character Strong, we bring social emotional learning, which is this huge hot topic and obviously needed, the skill sets, but right alongside the character development piece. And a lot of the character development piece is leadership development. It falls under these pieces, is what we've been talking about here. And just show me the numbers. Like, how many kids did you say recently getting ready for, is it next year, have already applied for being a part of the classes where you're teaching many of these topics?
Yeah, I mean, under the current structure, we don't have enough room for all of them. It's close to 300 kids now that want to take leadership. And I think we only have room right now to house 200 of them. And that's just this year adding a second leadership teacher so she can teach the principles. And she's doing obviously an incredible job, because the retention is almost 100% for those kids. And so how do you continue to build that thing out? Well, they're so, like you said, they're so hungry for it. And I want to touch on something too here. I don't know if it's too much off script for right now, because I know we're trying to close, but something that you said to me, one thing you said to me early on was how much respect you had for somebody who decided to learn how to take this leadership curriculum and make it their own. And I remember it felt so dumb, because I looked at you and thought, oh, we can do that? Like, I can personalize this? And now here we are, right? But the other part was on that very first day of that training. So here's our nice circle ending, right? That very first day of training, you said, remember, when you do this, when you teach this, my story is my story. That story about Aaron, that's my story. You can't tell that story. If you want me to come in, I can tell it, but it's best if you tell yours. And I think originally I thought that was to gain interest, right? That, because I was riveted by your story and how it fully comes back around, even with newer information, you know, and it's so cool. But then I realized what I'm actually doing when I put myself out there and talk about how low character I was and how I was a user of people and everything was transactional, and I used that power thing, and then I tried to save people and kept them as victims and all these things. What we are actually doing is modeling for our peers and our students how to reflect on failure, use life as an experiential teaching model, and just continue to serve the work to get better. That's it. And so this full transformation of, you know what, let go of this idea of the conventional classroom. Let go of this idea of stand and deliver. Let go of this idea of you are going to listen to me and you're going to do exactly what I say, and start having the confidence to allow kids to fill the space. You be a multiplier, allow kids to fill the space, allow them to direct their experience. And then it is what it is. But it doesn't reflect on you unless you try to control the experience and ruin it for kids.
Yeah. So good. Well, I think there it is. I mean, that's the place to, with that charge, with that challenge, close it down. Grateful, man. I hope that this elicits conversation. I know that the virtual summit is going to have connections where people can immediately, from looking at pieces that are below the video for this, engage in social media, ask questions, put it out there. Please do. There are some solid thoughts here that people should push on, that they should consider, talk about. And I know that, Don, you are more than welcome, more than invite that, conversation to happen, and do a great job of pushing in on it. So I'm so thankful for your time. That was so good. And I know we're going to be seeing each other soon and continuing to dig into this work.
Yeah.
But thank you for pushing on it. Thanks for, with passion, challenging what needs to be challenged, I think, in education and the way that we're leading, whether it's as a coach, whether it's as a teacher or building leader. And I know that people are going to find great value from this. So grateful for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate you, brother, very much for all of this and what you've done, what you continue doing, what we're going to do in the future.
Thank you.